Hey guys, welcome to Educators Roundtable. So, tonight we're going to continue our conversation about hot topics ripped from the headlines. And I want to say the purpose of this podcast is just to highlight there's so many different layers of education. And sometimes on the surface, we look at one thing which we think is solving the problem, which is politics and money. But a lot of times it's more than that happening. With teacher shortages and with students acting in so many different ways and teachers not feeling that they're appreciated for what they do, this podcast is to show you that we do have to continue to look at education, but just not the top layers. We've got to dig deep because if we want to fix education, every layer has to be addressed. So these are the things that got ripped from the headlines, and that's what we're here to discuss tonight. So welcome my guest, and you guys know her. She was here last week. This is Dr. DeVoe. Dr. DeVoe, thank you so much for joining us again this week. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back. I guess the people not tired of me yet, huh?
No, they're not. But I'm going to tell you. So we got a lot of feedback from last week's podcast, ripped from the headlines. And I'm going to tell you, I think people were a little bit outraged. One from the teacher who was licking the nipple during class time, which, I mean, we totally expected that.
Yeah.
So I think, and there's a couple things that I think teachers or people may be concerned about from this show, week's show, because it's a lot happening. There's a lot of things we need to take a closer look at in education. So overall, what's your perspective on the things that you saw last week and how it's impacting education or people's perception of education?
After I kind of reflected on last week's videos, especially the one about the teacher, like that was really disturbing to me. And I guess at the core of everything, I hope that we are thinking about our scholars first, the students, right? And the impact that our behavior as adults, the policymakers, the teachers, the superintendents is having on the scholars.
Yeah.
Right. And so even with that instance, like, was those children that was impacted by that, were they able to get some type of trauma? That's trauma.
Yeah, that was huge. And I think a lot of times that's what people are not understanding and they're overlooking is that, unfortunately, we didn't create the headlines. We're just reporting what's out there. And this is stuff that's happening right now this year. Some of the things you'll see tonight are just weeks, like last week, is happening and things are continuing to happen in education. But again, when you don't bring attention to these things, they seem to fall back. And I just want to say this as a former teacher, as a former school administrator, as a person who's now an IT consultant with several school districts across the United States. Trust me when I say to you, a lot of things or my opinions that I share with you will be conversations that I've had with teachers. Teachers would like to come on and talk about it, but they're also afraid that if their superintendent or their school leaders hear them talking about what's really happening in these classrooms, how that would impact their job. Although we know it's a shortage, they still feel like their jobs will be impacted. So I just want us to understand that these things are really happening. And some of the things I'm going to say tonight are quotes from teachers, situations that are currently occurring. So I'm going to say, let's get started. This one is really going to shock a lot of people tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say this is what's in the headlines. It's not for me.
Tonight, a teacher in Indiana arrested on a preliminary charge of battery after slapping a student. Surveillance video released by Valgo Community Schools appears to show a student in a hoodie walking down a hallway at Jimtown High School in Elkhart, Indiana last Friday. Moments later, a male teacher is seen chasing after him. Upon reaching the student, the teacher appears to grab him by the backpack. And this, an open-handed slap, the school district says. The student's head appearing to ricochet off the wall. The teacher appears to grab the student by the arms before yanking him down the hall. Within seconds, the student preliminary charges on the ground. After slapping a student. Surveillance video released by Valgo Community Schools appears to show a student in a hoodie walking down a hallway at Jimtown High School in Elkhart, Indiana last Friday. Moments later, a male teacher is chasing after him. The teacher appears to be directly and severely addressed. The student involved in the incident is not being identified publicly by the school. Police have now arrested the teacher, 61-year-old Mike Kozinski, on a felony charge of battery.
It's a range of 6 months to 2.5 years and a penalty of up to $10,000.
The school district says Kozinski was confronting the student about his hoodie. No audio can be heard on the surveillance video, and NBC was unable to reach Kozinski for comment. He retired within hours of the incident, according to the district. His retirement, originally set for June, was approved by the school board Monday night, a quicker resolution than terminating him, according to a source familiar with the board's decision. Before video of the confrontation was released, many in the community rallied around the 2020 Teacher of the Year. Dozens of students at Jimtown High School staged a walkout in support of the teacher, and more than 1,300 people signed a Change.org petition aimed at saving Kozinski's tenure and retirement. The district says they have reported the incident to the Department of Child Services, which declined to comment due to state confidentiality laws.
And Priscilla Thompson joins us now in studio. Now, Priscilla, you mentioned in your story that the school board allowed the teacher to retire early with a full benefits package, but we're being told that he would have gotten his pension anyway if he were fired. Walk me through that.
Right. So a source familiar with the school board's decision says that even if he had been fired, he still would have gotten his pension per Indiana law. And in fact, if they had fired him, that source says they would have had to put him on administrative leave and continue to pay him during what could have been a months-long investigation. And ultimately, he probably still would have received that pension.
Okay, so we're back. All right, so what are your thoughts?
So many things. I would venture to say, and everybody say, this is Chastity's opinion. This is Chastity's opinion. I would imagine that this is not the first incident with this gentleman. That is not the first child that he assaulted. I do not feel that he should have been allowed to retire. I don't think he should have been allowed to retire. Yes, he may have still gotten his pension, but you were fired, right? That is a stain on your record. Not, oh, I retired. Because think about it. If he's retired, we're here in Michigan. Why did you leave your last school? Oh, I retired. I'm going to come in to go to another school in Michigan and be a consultant, right? Not that he was terminated from the school. And also, I'm thinking just even the interaction. This student is walking. We don't know, right? We couldn't hear any of the talking that was going on. We couldn't hear any audio. But to me, it did not look like the student was resistant or trying to fight or run away from him in any way. So why would it be necessary for him to push this scholar's head against the wall? So that's why I believe that this probably wasn't the first incident that happened.
So you know what? And everything you said, I took that perspective, but then I also took the perspective that potentially this could be a student who antagonized the teacher on a regular basis. And maybe it just gotten to the point where it really wasn't about the hoodie. It was about something else. Mm-hmm. And then maybe it just kind of, that was it. The teacher just kind of had it because everything that everyone said about the teacher was that this was a great teacher. He was teacher of the year. Like, why would this teacher lose it over a hoodie? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say to you, I remember I started my first job at Redford High School. And this student who never came to school would come to my first period every morning to antagonize me. He would leave for the rest of the day. He would actually show up just for first period to biology to antagonize me. And I used to say to myself, oh my God, if I ever see this kid in the alley, I'm going to hem him up, right? If I ever see this kid, I'm going to hem him up. He would come to class and just do little stuff like, oh yeah, B, I hear you. Are you really teaching? Do you know what you're doing? And then he would raise his hand and say, how long are you going to be a B? Shall I spell it out? B-I-T-C-H. Like he used to do stuff like this in the middle of my biology class. But because of the limitations as to how you can discipline a student, I wasn't really able to get up in his face the way I wanted to. And I consistently called his mother. But obviously the mother knew that there was an issue. And she says, well, you know, you just got to have some patience. I think he has some potential mental issues. Can you get him tested? Because he's coming to school just for me. I later found out that this student did have mental issues, but the mother really never put the time in to have the student tested. So again, there's always two sides to the coin. There's no justification because this is high school. I taught high school. This is like elementary school. There's nothing that an elementary school kid could do to make me want to hem them up. But at the same time, I have to take that back because I've talked to some teachers and they're like, Christine, those elementary school kids are trying you. Like they're trying you. So I'm going to say there's two sides to every coin. I think definitely school districts need to look at putting cameras in classrooms so they can really evaluate and assess from start to finish what actually occurred. There was no volume, so you don't know what the teacher was saying to him. I don't think that the teacher handled it correctly. I understand like him and a kid up and getting them out of your classroom and taking them down the hall, but the whole slapping them thing, I thought that was a little aggressive. Like, I don't know what happened, but that was over the top. I would never hit my own kid like that.
So then I'm sorry. So I have a question for you. In that situation, in that moment, this kid is coming on and you wanted to, but you didn't. So what is the difference in you showing that restraint, right? Yeah. And then not showing that restraint? Because I would imagine, I don't know, and teachers log, if you're watching, log in. I am not a teacher. I subbed for a half a semester and it was online, right? So it wasn't that face-to-face, right? But are you all trained, right, in when you have these conflicts, how to resolve those classroom conflicts, right? And I would imagine in 20 years in practice, I'm sorry.
Well, let me just say, kids are getting a little the things that they teach you. And I'm going to say, I didn't go to school to be an educator. I was taught after in a master's program. And then I spent 15 years in education. But I'm going to say this, that it's so unfortunate, but what they teach you sometimes doesn't add up to what's happening. Like these kids come into your classroom and they just come in on a whole different level of disrespect that you're like, okay, that little workshop I went to did not handle this. It didn't cover this part. So either, I need to really focus on how am I going to manage this as a person? Because we remember teachers are teachers, but they're also people too, right? And we keep forgetting that they have feelings and emotions. So if you constantly have one kid coming after you, sometimes you do tend to forget. And I just want us to be a little bit more understanding, but definitely that teacher going off and slapping them, that was a little aggressive. So guys, we're going to a quick commercial break and we'll right back. And we would love to hear what you think about how that teacher handled that situation. And we're going to cover our next rip from the headlines. Be right back. Okay, guys, we are back. Rip from the headlines. I'm going to tell you our next story that's coming up. Before you watch, let me just tell you, please remove any children from your space. This is not something that children should be seeing. And I would like to warn you in advance, this is nothing that children should be seeing. And again, we're showing you because at this point, this is not the first teacher and it may not be the last teacher. So you want to make sure you know who's in front of your children during their Zoom. Okay, guys, so we're going to show you our next rip from the headlines. Okay.
Christine, what you got me watching?
So I'm going to tell you, your expression was my expression. When my team sent that over to me, I was blown away. And the first thing I said was, this has got to be a joke. This teacher had to have known she was still live on camera. She had to have known. She's looking at the phone, she's facing the phone. And the sad part about it is that those were parents who were looking at the lesson supposedly that their student was getting from their teacher. So if you saw the rest of that, it would have been parents saying something that really wasn't, I couldn't put it on here. But the parents were shocked that a teacher was doing this. So I'm looking at your facial expression. I'm just going to tell you, I was blown away. I was heartbroken at first. And then I was appalled. And then I wanted to kind of hem up the teacher. So I went through a couple variations of emotional, like, are you kidding me? So what's your thought when you see that?
Disbelief. First off, like, what? Are you serious right now? If she decided to participate in that activity at that time of day, she could have you can still run your classroom by just turning your camera off. Right. I'll be right back, you all. Turn your camera off and your volume off. You still have the students in the classroom setting.
But wait a minute. How about you're on class time? Why are you having sex with your husband, your boyfriend, or whomever? This is class time. If you were in the classroom, you couldn't be bent over anything. So why do you think because you're working from home that this is acceptable? And that's the one thing I didn't understand. It's the same, is equivalent to the teacher who turned around during class time last week and licked her man's nipple. Like, you have on a headset, you're teaching the class, and to your point, you didn't turn off the camera. You just turned around and licked his nipple. But more importantly, he was naked. He was nude, standing there. So here we have another teacher. I guess their thought is you're in my home and it's okay that I'm doing what I'm doing. But to me, you're diminishing what good educators put in time and effort, and you're diminishing that. And your choice to display your personal life is being debuted, but then you have teachers who are doing rock star stuff who can't even make the news.
And it's kind of like the discussion you and I had before. How can we go to bat for you? How can we fight for you? Right? When our teachers are doing great things, they're overworked, they're underpaid. And then, the rebuttal is, well, look at this.
Well, and that's the thing. That one teacher, their action, and the other teacher who's licking nipples, those are the things that people are going to bring up. They're going to talk about these teachers and not the great things that are happening in the classroom.
Absolutely.
We've got teachers who are really working hard against all the odds to ensure that our kids are learning right now. This pandemic is not over. So we're going in and out, and this variant changes, every single month, every other month, the variant is changing. So it just kind of diminished education to me. And I'm just going to say this to everyone. Listen, I know you have significant others, but when you're on class time, you're on class time. That should be a space that's just really sanctioned for educating regardless. And I'm sorry, he would just have to wait. But again, that was one of the things when I tell you, I was just like, is this really happening?
Yeah. If I was one of the parents on the call, I would have called the police and said, I don't know where to send them. But I would have called the police and said, it is a child molester, it's
that's child pornography. Right? It's pornography. You're doing a sexual act in front of kids in your camera. And the thing is, this is a kicker. You're an educator. And I'm very sure that was not a sub. And even if it was, you're smart enough to know when your camera's on and when your camera's off. Like, you're smart enough to know this. So in that moment, you're looking at your phone. In Zoom, you see yourself. You didn't see yourself in Zoom. You didn't see that this was happening. So that's the thing that drastically concerns me, is that you didn't see yourself and this was happening.
I wonder, did they say the disciplinary actions that happened to her? Did they say that they
No.
got some type of trauma counseling for all of those scholars? Heck, and the parents who had to witness that.
Oh my, and the grade level. They never clarified what grade level she taught, only that she was a teacher in the Birmingham school district, and not Michigan, Birmingham, by the way. This is Birmingham in another state. But it was really appalling to see that a teacher had very little respect for herself, for her students, for her parents, just for education in general, that you would even do this or attempt to do this. I mean, between her and the nipple lady last week, the nipple teacher out of New York, I don't know what to say. People, you're working from home right now and you're still teachers, you're still professionals.
Mm-hmm.
It is no way, even that's equivalent to us doing this podcast, and right in the middle of the podcast, our significant others walk over. Like, I'm sorry, the door is closed. I'm busy. This is what I'm doing right now. So I don't know what to say. So our next one is going to be very interesting.
Is
So
it worse?
it's like, is it a part two to this?
Randy, I heard
Here we go.
It is so disturbing.
Yeah, very much so. Some late developments tonight. I showed that video to a tech and a cybersecurity expert who's raising concerns about whether that video may have been altered. No comment from the district on that aspect of this situation, but they say this is something they are not taking lightly, and the impact it's having on parents and students here is all too real.
Name them all. Winfrey.
This troubling video has struck a nerve amongst African Americans in the Plymouth Canton community. It appears to show a white high school student threatening to shoot and lynch African Americans, all while repeatedly calling them racial slurs.
I'm not able to give details. There is not an active threat, I will say, at our school at this moment.
Plymouth Canton Community School Superintendent Monica Merritt addressed the video during a board meeting and in a letter to parents and students Monday night, saying, "We do not condone or tolerate reprehensible acts of this nature. Students tell me the video first surfaced in early March and was later reshared on social media.
I can't even tell you in the past few days since this video has released how many times I've been called the N-word. When we don't have swift action after these events, this spreads even further."
PCCS students and parents gave the school board an earful at Tuesday night's meeting, many asking if the student in question was disciplined and how Black students are supposed to feel safe at school after this.
This has red flags all over it. I don't want this type of student around my child who is so very apparent to be able to say whatever they want about killing people who look like me.
Students say there's been other racist incidents within the district. Jacob Jackson says so much so, they've become numb to it.
It's not surprising. It's not surprising. This has happened countless times, and that's why it has happened countless times, because the same thing occurs over and over. And then we have it to where we get used to things like this, and we get desensitized to things like this.
Merritt stated in her letter Monday, when this matter was initially brought to the attention of the Plymouth Canton Educational Park Administration, it was investigated immediately and addressed with the students involved. We will not under any circumstances ignore these matters and will continue to work to eliminate these harmful and destructive behaviors and beliefs. Now, guys, Canton PD says that they are investigating this matter, and once they're done with it, they plan on sending the findings of this investigation to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office.
Okay, so what's your thoughts? And just to let you guys know who are viewing from other states, this is an incident that just occurred here in the state of Michigan just last week. This is a real issue that just happened in Canton, Michigan just last week, and that is the superintendent and the school board. And that's only 30 minutes from where we're located. And that would be myself and Dr. DeVoe right now. So, Dr. DeVoe, what's your thoughts?
So I want to get a little clarity, and I want to be clear. Did I indeed hear the superintendent said that this was not an immediate threat?
Yes.
And it was a white student using racial slurs and threatening to kill and lynch Black students?
Correct.
So threatening to kill someone is not an immediate threat?
Yes.
So I'm very disappointed with her. And so again, I want to unpack. I want to know more. I need to know more.
Mm-hmm.
What is there some type of policy or something in the Canton School Board District where they define what an immediate threat is? Like threaten to kill, oh, that's not immediate threat. They have to like actually see the gun, like. So I want to like, how are they defining that?
So the first question you ask is very important. Is how do you define what requires immediate action? That's number one. And the first thing I'm going to say to you is this requires immediate action. This required an assembly. This required meeting with parents. This required banning the student from the school. This is finding out who the student are friends with, meeting with those students, and then asking them to then you work from home, because it can't just be this one student. There's a group of them. Okay. And if anyone understands, students don't do things on their own. It's usually like a group. They're having a conversation, not only with themselves, but with others. So when you look at it from that perspective, you've got to understand that the student should be dealt with right now in this moment. When parents got up and they're telling the superintendent and the board how disturbed they are by their student being in any way contact or in contact with this type of student, that says a lot. I would be outraged. But not only that, the student said this is not the first time that this has occurred. So they become so desensitized to being, I mean, how do you come to school every day knowing at any point somebody's going to come up and call you the N-word? And it's okay. It's okay that somebody threatens you because you're different than them. And your superintendent says in a board meeting, this is not an issue. Then when does it become an issue? When we have a situation like Oxford, that's when it becomes an issue. When we hit national news because students decided to shoot up a classroom or a building. I'm 100% appalled by the actions of this superintendent and that school board. And they are 30 minutes from us. This just happened last week.
I remember one of the former bosses I had, and that was one takeaway that I remember him saying: if it comes across my desk, I have to handle it, no matter how big, no matter how small. If it comes across my desk, I have to handle it. And so I'm just even thinking about her and her administration. So it came across your desk, it came up to get to the superintendent. What happened at the school level with the principal when that administration at the high school,
Right.
when the students reported it, when they found out about it, what happened there? Are they saying anything about what happened there?
Oh, and that's the thing that concerns me. So the way the response has gone up to this point and all the information that we have, to your point, is a couple things. One, I'm going to say as an IT person, cybersecurity is not what people think. It's not just you defending against anything outside of your school. It's you being able also to track things that are occurring in the school, conversations that are occurring. And you're supposed to be able to do that in a very respectful way. So I'm going to say this, as I've said to school districts is prime for any person who likes to hack information. And I mean private information. And the reason being is that they don't have the levels of security to protect students, protect teachers' information. All the teachers' financial information is there, where you live, your phone number. And when I tell you the best hackers across the country are students. So I'm going to say this so there's no misunderstanding. If that student says that he's going to do what he says he's going to do, how do you know he didn't hack into your system and get people's information? Because they said cybersecurity, and that hit me with a huge alarm, because I'm thinking to myself as an IT consultant, what do you mean cybersecurity? Why would this situation be a cybersecurity situation? Did he hack and get people's information? And we're not saying that he has the students' information. Should these parents be looking at getting personal security or some type of safety measures at their homes? Like, what are we saying? And that's the thing. I'm listening to the conversation, but I'm like, is anyone else listening and hearing what I'm hearing?
Mhm.
So again, we've got to start looking at being proactive. And again, that superintendent, I'm just very much appalled by her actions, and not only protecting her staff, but protecting her students.
Mhm.
She should be putting a lot of new protocols and procedures in place, because the student said this is ongoing. This is nothing new.
Mhm.
She's dropping the ball. And I'll be honest with you, they should be calling for her termination, like right now. I don't know who you're going to put in her place, but obviously she can't handle the job. And I'm not about getting anyone fired, but to me, her negligence in this, it's just, what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for Oxford to happen? That's all.
Exactly. And I will say, for the students to have normalized this,
Yes.
oh, I'm going to, oh, this is just another crazy person threatening to kill me because I'm Black. Huh? How is that normal? So you've created a culture in this school district area, this school, where that's normal, where I can say what I want to say, do whatever I want to do to these Black scholars, and nothing is going to happen.
There's no repercussions.
There's no immediate alarm. It's just some kids playing around.
And that's the thing that 100% alarms me, because the culture, the environment that these kids are in, that is just mentally and emotionally damaging to them. And you're expecting them to perform at a high level, knowing that they're not respected by their peers, and there's no repercussions for their actions, for their negative actions towards them. The young man says, oh, they just call us the N-word on a regular. What does that mean? So the only thing I can say is, folks, have we become so desensitized because of social media, the impact that these things can have on our students and people long term? We cannot be this desensitized to what's happening. So, folks, I want you to think about that, and I want you to stay tuned for our next Rip from the Headlines. You are going to be shocked by what you see. So again, we're doing our best to inform you about what's happening, but they're ripped from the headlines. These are real conversations, things that are happening. Be right back. Okay, guys, we are back. And the only thing I can say to you is, once again, I need you to be prepared for what you're about to see. It's going to be very interesting. And I know, so Dr. DeVoe, your facial expression, every time I say that, you're like, what else can she come? All I can tell you is this stuff is really happening. And it's shocking, I know, but this is really happening in education right now. So.
And back here at home, we're learning the elementary school student accused of attacking a teacher likely will not face charges because he's too young in the eyes of the law. Local 10's Ian Margle is live. He's in Pembroke Pines now with this update. Ian, this little boy is only, 5 years old?
5 years old, and that is why he likely will not face charges. The law basically saying he isn't old enough to know right from wrong at this point. And today we also learned this teacher has some pretty serious injuries and actually needs surgery. And it's possible this student has actually hurt this teacher more than once. This all happened on Wednesday in a class for students with special needs at Pines Lakes Elementary in Pembroke Pines. Apparently, two students, a 4- and a 5-year-old, began throwing things around the classroom and flipping chairs. The 5-year-old, who everyone has been talking about at the center of this, was brought to another room to help calm him down, but apparently he lunged at the teacher when she wasn't expecting it. When first responders got there, she had fallen backwards, smacked her head. The 13-year veteran teacher was unresponsive for those first responders. She was rushed to the hospital. We're told she suffered a pretty major concussion along with several other major injuries. And Anna Fusco, the president of the Broward Teachers Union, says this is actually the third time this teacher has had to be taken from the school by fire rescue because of injuries from this student, that she's actually asked the school district for help in the classroom more than once, but has been told the district doesn't have the resources.
Enough with the excuses, and do it for the good of the student, which in turn is for the good of the whole class, and is in the good of the employee. That mother has a right to go home to her child without being injured to take care of her child and not be choked out, a bookshelf thrown on her, and now this concussion and everything else. It's not okay.
So the good news is that teacher is back home, but again, her injury is pretty serious and she still does need that surgery. Again, this 5-year-old likely will not face charges, but again, this is all still under investigation and police say anything could change. Live in Pembroke Pines, I'm Ian Margol, Local 10 News.
Okay. You know what? I can only tell you, and I say this because that was my facial. That was my expression when I saw this the first time. So the first thing I want to say is that a 5-year-old, they never showed the picture of the 5-year-old, by the way, at all. And the other videos that they showed of the teacher, she's a Caucasian teacher. She must be about maybe 5'2", 5'3", maybe 112 pounds. She's not really a big person. So I'm assuming this toddler, this 5-year-old, must be at least her height, maybe a little heftier, because she is in the hospital with a concussion. She's had some physical damage and requires surgery. So the first thing I'm going to say to you is, his comment was, this was not the first time at all. So if you notice wasn't the first time that this occurred, what do you think about that?
So does it take for this woman, unfortunately, does it take for this woman to have to be hurt, injured, hospitalized, have to get surgery for them to see that maybe this student needs to be in another environment?
Again, when you look at school leaders, and I'm just going to say this, we have to stop dismissing a student's outburst for this is just a simple call home, let me talk to the parents. They stated this was not the student's first time being aggressive towards the teacher. So my thing is, what happened the multiple times before this that this situation wasn't resolved? One, you could have either gotten her help in the classroom, gotten her a classroom assistant. You could have said, regardless whether you want your student to be tested, he has to be tested in order to stay in this class. And if not, you're going to have to, an adult has to accompany him to class because he has physically assaulted the teacher. Now, my concern is not only that, but what are the laws that a child cannot be prosecuted for assaulting a teacher to the point where they have to be taken away in an ambulance and they require surgery? The kid is not going to be prosecuted because he's 5?
Even if he's not prosecuted, something has to be done. And
right.
I have a 4-year-old grandson. So I understand not putting and blasting this minor, right? This baby, he's 5, he's a baby. Mm-hmm. And putting and blasting his picture and all of that over there. But if something needs to be done. Something needs to be done where he needs to have some more mental evaluations. Mm-hmm. Maybe he needs to do a 72-hour hold. I don't know. I am a doctor of philosophy, PhD, higher not an MD. Let me put that out there. So I don't know how all of that works, but clearly there's something going on there. There's something going on there. The third time she asked for help, you all didn't give her help in the classroom. Like what is she supposed to do? And then imagine that. How does she balance that? That's her livelihood. Yes, I'm being attacked and feeling uncomfortable about these scholars, but I might have a family and a child that I have to feed. So I can't just walk away and I could not leave this job. And where's this support from the administration?
Well, and also I'm going to say this. If other students are watching a 5-year-old beat you up in the classroom, what does that then say to the other students about, you know, the discipline? And I'm going to say this. I know we put in these laws about us not being able to put our hands on students. And I just, the parents have no recourse. The teachers have no recourse for discipline. I'm not understanding how they're assuming. And I'm going to say this as a child who did not. I was not one of those kids who required a lot of discipline. I was one of those kids, you can say it to me one time and we're good. I can hear you say it to somebody else and we're good. I learned I didn't need you to physically touch me or talk to me about my behavior. I wasn't one of those kids who acted out. But I'm going to say to you, kids will mimic what they see. And if they know that there is no reaction or no discipline that's going to follow or any recourse for any of their bad behavior, what does that say? And I'm going to say this too. Kids watch the news too. So a kid who watches this is on the news in their state, like, oh, I can beat the heck out of my teacher. And if I'm young, they can't prosecute me. Oh, okay. All right. Let's see what happens the next time my teacher says or does something I don't like. So they don't understand the mentality of our kids now is far more advanced. We didn't have all these things. We didn't have social media. TV was not on 24 hours a day. TV used to go off. They used to play the American flag song, a little song at the end, and TV was off, for hours. And it would come back on for cartoons for you to go to school in the morning or whatever. So now you have access to all of these channels. I was watching something the other day and they were using profanity on regular network TV. And I was just like, you can say bitch on TV now? When did this happen? Like, I don't when we start saying this. So I'm going to say to you, I'm very shocked and surprised. I'm very appalled by the school district and how they handled it. I really feel for the teacher and I feel for the other teachers in the building, because if a 5-year-old is doing this, it's not the first 5-year-old. It's some other things happening there that the kid feels like it's open season on a teacher or teachers. Okay. So I want to be clear. This is just not acceptable. No way, shape or form. Now from your perspective, you're in higher ed. I'm just not understanding, how are students in that space? Are students just doing whatever, saying whatever to their professors in college? Are they approaching it appropriately? I mean,
well, the scholars have a little more, they are encouraged to share their thoughts with the professors and their beliefs. But there's protocols in place to where the professor can ask you to leave. If you do not leave, they can call security and get the dean of students involved, right? So I don't know. Do you call the security on a 5-year-old? Like,
most definitely I would. Again, I've only taught high school. Yeah. I mean, I've been a assistant superintendent over K-12. And I did assist with a lot of different issues in the classroom, such as outbursts with students, fights, discipline. I was a person over discipline for the district. And when they saw me coming, they would be, oh my God, Burkett's coming. I'm in trouble. So, and I'm just to the point. I mean, my thing is, my form of discipline was definitely different than a lot of other people. I didn't believe in suspending. I would have you read books and do book reports for me, and you would have to sit in my office. In any class that you had a low GPA in, I would tutor you for 2 hours after school. See, to me, I'm going to make you do what you were supposed to do. And that's your discipline. I'm not going to send you home so you can sit at home with your parents and then not return the work that you were given packages of. I don't do all that, and then I would make the parent come to like 3 or 4 counseling, sessions. So if your kid was disciplined by me, it's a cause and effect for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I handle it. But again, I'm a little bit different disciplinarian, even with my own kid. I mean, I was like, what am I grounding you for? Let's talk about cause and effect, And so in this situation, something's going on in a home. Maybe the kid is mimicking what he's seeing. Is the kid seeing a counselor? Did they suggest that he sees a counselor? He should be removed from the classroom. I'm not going to say he should be homeschooled, but he should be in a pull-out situation, alternative class, whatever. And then you also need to teach culture. Effective communication skills are so important in students understanding how to behave appropriately and how to talk to people. You can have disagreements, but you don't have to put your hands on anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that needs to be taught in schools. And again, I know I'm an IT person, and people are probably saying this is coming from the IT lady, but it is. The IT lady is suggesting that we have effective communication skills really pushed in the classrooms because our kids really need it. So I'm going to tell you our next one. It's interesting as well. I know you're like, where do I get all these things from? The only thing I can tell you is it's out there. It's real. So here we go.
Up first tonight, a lot of parents and students in Spring Branch ISD are asking, what was she thinking?
Here's the deal. An English teacher is under fire for this controversial lesson about the N-word. It happened today at Stratford High School, and a photo of the lesson quickly went viral. Grace White getting a reaction tonight. Grace?
That teacher here at Stratford High School now on administrative leave as students took to social media to share what happened today inside their classroom.
It was just really shocking at first because it was there on the board.
It was in an English class at Stratford High School. Student Karina Rogerson says she took this picture of her teacher's warm-up activity.
How is the N-word complicated and how has it changed in 75 words? We had to write about it. And she didn't say N-word in the assignment. She actually wrote out the word on the board and then had a Tupac quote next to it that also had the N-word written out onto it. So this all started because we were about to start our book unit of Their Eyes Watching God, I believe, which was written by a Black woman.
It was shocking, inappropriate, inexcusable, any adjective you want to use. That's what it was.
Terry Abbott, spokesman for Spring Branch ISD, says the teacher was removed from the classroom and placed on leave while the district investigates. But he tells KHOU 11 they've already learned this.
This was not a lesson plan that was approved in advance by anybody. Had it been, it wouldn't have been approved.
The principal sent an email out to parents, but this mom still has questions.
And I would like to know, did this teacher not follow the system? Is there not a system in place? Is there going to be a system, and what improvements can we make to the system?
We asked the district if teachers go through diversity training. They told us they do, and this sort of thing they say should have never happened. Len and Mia.
Okay.
Father God, in the name of Jesus, we just ask you to move right now in our school. Lord, move right now. What is?
So I'm going to tell you, since we start doing Rip from the Headlines, that is the second altercation with a teacher using the N-word in the classroom. The first time, which was last week, when the teacher approached a student in the class by using the N-word and said it didn't mean anything. And the high school student had to educate the teacher, yes, it is. And he was the only black male student. He was the only black student and male student in the classroom. So I'm going to say to you now, this teacher decided to do it as a warm-up assignment and use Tupac. By the way, I love Tupac, whoever's watching. The hologram concert of Tupac had me very emotional, but we won't bring that up because that's not what this is about. But I want to say I like Tupac. So I'm going to say that was shocking. What do you think about her? What do you think her intent was?
So did they disclose the race of the teacher?
Caucasian.
Oh, girl. What was you thinking? What were you thinking? Clearly she was not thinking that. She did not really think about how this could be triggering for some scholars. I would imagine that is that a predominantly white high school?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
it's mixed, but yes.
Okay. How this could even be triggering for some scholars in the classroom. That's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, like I guess thank goodness for this administration saying, hey, we did not approve this. Hey, we let her go, right? Taking immediate action for this. I wonder what was her intent. Like, what was the objective of the assignment? What was the goal of the assignment?
Well,
and why did she think this was why did she think this was okay?
So that's the question I have. So when you look at an assignment, and by the way, I just want to be clear, I was a math and science teacher, not a social studies teacher. I only taught social studies as a substitute, and that's when I was an assistant superintendent, because there was no social studies teacher, and I decided to stretch myself. And the kids thought I was pretty rock star, by the way. So kudos to my high school social studies teacher. I'm going to say to you, regardless of what the lesson was about, and this sounds like an English teacher because they said they were going to go read a book the following week that was written by a Black author. The first thing I'm going to say is that desensitizing or attempting to desensitize students to a word that has been in our culture for over 200 years in a negative way, it's not going to stop by you putting it into an assignment.
With Tupac.
I just want to say with a Tupac quote. First of all, don't and one of the things that I'm going to tell you with my Caucasian friends, they always say, well, you guys use it in songs and you guys go, what's up, N-word and all that. But let me explain something to you. There's a difference when we use it in our term, in our world, and there's a difference when an outsider uses it. We use it not to desensitize it, but we use it in a humorous way because we've had to create it a way to manage the anger behind the word. But when we say it to one another, and I don't ever use the word, but when it's heard and said, it's not a negative thing. But when outsiders say it, the intent is always in our processing that is negative. So to me, when you're in a school district where it's not a large population of African American students, when you use this in a lesson, what was your purpose behind it? You could put Tupac or Eminem or any rapper with it. I don't care who you use, right? Mm-hmm. The bottom line is, what was your intent behind this lesson? And I'm missing that part. There's no way that you can explain. And so again, I'm glad, like to your point, I'm really happy the way they handled this situation, in letting the teacher know this is not acceptable, but every teacher moving forward, these type of acts are not acceptable. And again, I'm going to say racism is impacting our classrooms. Ladies and gentlemen, if you know of a teacher, and this is not the only thing that we're going to show on Rip from the Headlines next week, you're going to see a teacher who teaches hate, literally hate. They have flags up in their classroom associated with people who are very familiar with the KKK. Okay? And this is in a school where they're saying this teacher's like an amazing teacher. But again, people are not separating what people are doing outside of the classroom with how effective they are in the classroom. And there's no separation. When I was a teacher, I knew what I did outside the classroom was going to impact who I was in the classroom. Just like I know now what I do outside the classroom, what I do outside my job, my 2 IT companies, impacts what happens with my company. I'm the face of my company. So therefore, I can't just do nonsense. There's repercussions for this. So I'm just going to say, people, when you're interviewing substitutes, when you're interviewing teachers, please start asking more questions. Don't ask what education affiliations do you have? What affiliations do you have, period? What do you do on your off time? What is your passion? Befriend. You got to start befriending and talking to these people because this is happening. And this teacher's in front of these kids. So she said, let's do a warm up on the N word and took a quote for Tupac. I'm concerned. That's the only thing I can say is I'm concerned. Okay, guys. So our next one, and this is our last one for tonight. And the only thing I can say to you is be prepared. Be prepared. I know.
No.
South Carolina fifth graders told to sing while picking cotton in a field.
I'm livid right now.
In the middle of Black History Month.
I'm African American, and my ancestors pick cotton. Why would I want my son to pick cotton and think it's fun?
This cell phone video shot by a teacher was sent to parents and brought this mom to tears.
I think it's making a mockery.
The mockery of what?
A mockery of slavery, a mockery of what our people went through.
Jessica Blanchard's 10-year-old son, Jamari, says he didn't understand what he was singing. Nor did teachers explain how cotton fields were harvested by African American slaves.
Did they talk about how slaves used to pick cotton?
No.
A permission slip sent to parents does mention picking cotton as part of a history lesson, not on slavery, but the Great Depression. For 15 years, Rock Hill fifth graders have been coming to the Carroll School, which was built in 1929 by and for African Americans. It now serves as a teaching center for African American history during the Great Depression and is run by Rock Hill Schools. The district calls this, quote, a unique learning opportunity that promotes understanding about our past and helps students make real-life connections.
They thought it was funny.
Jamari says picking cotton was part of the game. He thought it was fun.
It was a contest. Whoever picked the least amount of cotton had to hold the big sack called Big Mama.
There is no race. The kids go out there and they pick, and the Big Mama concept is just a, it's humor.
81-year-old Wally Cathcart is an instructor here at the Carroll School, where he was also a student in 1943. The son of sharecroppers, this former cotton farmer now shows kids what he and his parents had to do to survive.
We need innovation in the educational system, not just lecturing children, sitting up in a classroom.
School officials say they correct children if they mention slavery, saying this is about the Great Depression. Cathcart calls the lesson living history.
What do you say to people who find this offensive and say that this trivializes slavery?
I certainly love the answer to that question because I deal with these issues all the time. One of the problems when it comes to African American people is that they fail to understand history in its proper context, and because of that, we're at a disadvantage today.
I asked why they skip over the history of slaves being forced to pick cotton. That's when district spokesman Michael Frost stopped the interview.
I don't think they should have anyone picking cotton.
As for Blanchard and her son, both support the Carroll School and its mission, but say this history lesson goes too far.
I think it's misguided. Maybe ignorance on their part.
In Rock Hill, South Carolina, Mac Brandt, Fox 46 Charlotte.
Okay. I'm going to say you right now. I'm very heartbroken. I'm extremely, because I see it maybe from a different perspective. So I want to hear what you have to say, but I'm just going to say I'm extremely heartbroken.
So this is actually a school. That where they went is a school.
Yes.
And this is one of their.
It's like a resource center, like a supplemental resource location where you can go, field trips, things like that within the school district. Yes. So I'm going to
say no one in administration, nobody ever thought that, you know what, it may not be okay to have students pick cotton.
No. So I'm going to say this to you. Initially, my thought was if it's a full history lesson on where your people came from and why you should respect where you're at and what you're doing, as a demonstration of how hard they had to work, the blisters, the cut hands, all of that. I understand if you're teaching the full story of slavery and cotton picking, right? But at the end, when he said, are you explaining? And the superintendent, they show his face and he's like, no, he doesn't want to talk about that. That's when my heart was broken, because now you're using what may have been good intentions of older Black culture being shared by gentlemen from that culture, from that history, from that time, and you've twisted it. Because now what you're doing as a white man, you're neglecting to share the full story of the history of cotton as it relates to African American. You're somehow turning it into a game as if you're trying to train a new breed of African Americans to think that they should be out there picking cotton fields. So to me, it's a mental game that you're now playing as a white superintendent on these African American men and children. Because I've consistently watched it and I can't come back with anything other than this is buffoonery at its highest level, and they're showing you in your face. They're really trying to twist the tables. And people, if you don't understand what's happening out here, in not only in education, just in general, if you don't understand what's happening out here, this is a clear indication. They're using the N word. They're basically threatening our kids in the buildings. And you're not understanding what's happening. I was so crushed and heartbroken. These kids said it was a game. They thought it was fun. It's not fun to pick cotton, honey. It's never fun to pick cotton. And it was extremely disrespectful to our culture.
And then this goes to show how they are constantly, as generation and generation and generation goes back, taking us out of the history books. Not that it was a whole book anyway, but now they're just totally erasing our history.
Because they said this was what? He said the whole lesson was about what? You recall what he said?
The Depression, the Great Depression.
Yes. He said this was a lesson about no, honey, way before the Great Depression. This was not a lesson about the Great Depression. And I'm going to say to you, the two older gentlemen, and no harm against them, I'm very sure they had good intentions behind that lesson. But again, when you're not an educator and the person who's talking to you a lot of times people think they're giving you an opportunity that's not an opportunity. And this was one of those things that it was not an opportunity. You were not educating our students on the African American history, and we were not a part of the Great Depression, honey. Our Black history in picking cotton came way before the Great Depression. And it's so unfortunate. So I'm going to say, I cried the first two times I watched that, because just to think that our babies are out there singing songs and thinking that it's fun when our ancestors died on cotton fields, literally unable to feed themselves or their families, hands blistered, torn, broken, ripped to shreds, and still unable to feed their families. That's where my concern is at. So,
and then I wonder how many other classes, many years have folks been going to this and it wasn't caught, right? And so we have in that school district, that area, a generation of scholars who, you picking cotton is fun.
Picking cotton is fun, and it's not. So, folks, I'm going to tell you, Dr. DeVoe, I appreciate you joining me again this week. And I know I'm always shocking you, right? Like every week, you're like, what is happening? Where did she get this stuff? And I'm going to tell you, I really love you coming on. Next week, we have a couple guests, including yourself, coming on, because we're really going to have a big debate. Next week it's basically focused on violence in the classroom. And it's going to be focused on teachers and students and what needs to be done. Teachers don't feel protected, and they feel like there needs to be more policies put in place, more precautions put in place for their protection. And we're going to talk more about that, because I'm going to tell you, right from the headlines, these things are happening in real time. So I'm going to thank you for joining me tonight. And before we go, I just want to say tomorrow I will be on this podcast, The Smack Productions. We're going to be talking about why did I attend an HBCU? And that'll be tomorrow, Thursday, at 7 p.m. And you can watch us on Facebook and on YouTube. So, folks, if you are thinking about sending your student to college, consider an HBCU, because I attended one, and that was Delaware State University in Dover, Delaware. So I will see you guys next Wednesday with more Rip from the Headlines. And everyone, thank you so much for watching us. We really appreciate it. If you would like to join the conversation, be sure to join us via comments. We would love to hear from you and love to hear what would you have to say about the things that we post and the things that we share with you. So again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday on Educators Roundtable, Rip from the Headlines.